The first cold morning of the year, you walk out to your car, and the windshield is a solid sheet of ice. You reach for the scraper, you crank the defroster. You sit there shivering for 10 minutes, burning fuel, going nowhere. Stop. There is a faster way, and it costs almost nothing. Here is what I am telling you today. 15 small things the Germans do with their cars will save you hundreds of dollars a year, add years to the life of your vehicle, and get you moving on a frozen morning in under 60 seconds. And most of them require nothing you do not already own. This is not internet nonsense. This is the quiet, stubborn, engineering-minded way an entire country keeps cars running for 20 years while the rest of us trade hours in every 5. I learned this the hard way. I spent one long winter in a little town outside Stuttgart, and I watched my neighbor, a retired machinist named Herr Vogel, walk to his 15-year-old Mercedes every morning and drive off while I was still scraping. I thought he was lucky. He was not lucky. He knew something. And by the end of this, I am going to hand you the strangest one of all, a trick recorded in a German driver's manual from the 1950s that keeps your windshield from icing over in the first place. It works on the car sitting in your driveway right now. No new tools, no trip to the shop. Let me start with that frozen windshield because it made me feel like a fool. That first winter I did what every American does. I sat in the driveway with the engine roaring, heater blasting, waiting for the glass to clear. Herr Vogel saw me one morning, shook his head, and waved me over to his garage. He handed me a spray bottle. Inside was nothing but water and rubbing alcohol, mixed about 2 parts alcohol to 1 part water. He told me to spray it across the ice. I did not believe him. But I tried it the next morning, and the ice went soft and slid off with one pass of the scraper. No waiting, no roaring engine. The alcohol drops the freezing point of the water far below zero, so the frozen layer simply lets go of the glass. That bottle cost me about $2 to make, and it turned a 10-minute battle into a 15-second wipe. But the reason Herr Vogel never idled his engine to melt ice was not just about being quick. It was about something most of us were never told, and once you hear it, you will never sit in that driveway warming up your car again. Here is the truth the Germans figured out decades ago. Letting a modern engine idle to warm up does almost nothing good and quite a lot of harm. A cold idling engine runs rich, meaning it dumps extra fuel that washes the protective oil film off your cylinder walls. The engineers at German motoring clubs have measured this for years. The fastest and safest way to warm an engine is to drive it gently, keeping the revs low for the first few minutes, so it reaches operating temperature under a light load instead of sitting still and stewing in its own unburned fuel. In fact, in Germany, leaving your engine idling needlessly is not just frowned upon. It is against the law, and has been for a long time, tied to rules that go all the way back to keeping the air clean in dense old city centers. You can actually be fined for warming up your car in the driveway. Think about that. While we were taught to let it run for 10 minutes on a cold morning, they were taught the exact opposite, and their cars last twice as long. Somebody sold us the idea that idling is good for the engine. It is not good for the engine. It is good for the fuel companies, and that is only the first thing they do differently before they even pull out of the driveway. Let me tell you about the tires, because this one genuinely shocked me. In Germany, when the weather turns cold, nearly everyone switches to a completely different set of tires. Winter tires. Not all season. Not the same rubber all year. They physically swap them twice a year, spring and fall. When I first heard this, I thought it was overkill, the kind of thing only a fussy engineer would bother with. Then Herr Vogel explained the science, and I felt cheated by every tire salesman I had ever met. Regular summer rubber gets hard and glassy below about 7 degrees Celsius, which is around 45 degrees Fahrenheit. Hard rubber cannot grip. Winter tires use a softer compound with hundreds of tiny slits called sipes that stay flexible in the cold and bite into snow and wet road. Braking tests done by German automotive testers show a car on winter tires can stop many car lengths shorter on a cold, wet road than the same car on summer tires. We are talking the difference between stopping in time and not stopping at all. Here is the part that saves you money. Because Germans run 2 sets of tires, each set only wears half the year. So a set of tires that would normally last 4 years lasts closer to 8. You are not spending more. You are spending the same money spread across twice the rubber, and you are far safer doing it. You do not need a shop for this. Plenty of German families keep their second set in the garage or basement, stacked flat, and swap them in the driveway with a jack and a wrench in about half an hour. There is even an old rule of thumb they repeat. From October to Easter, winter tires stay on. Simple, memorable. It has probably saved thousands of lives. But tires are only half of what keeps a German car glued to the road, because the other half is something you cannot see, and it is quietly destroying most cars in North America right now. I am talking about rust. And what the Germans do about it made me realize how badly the rest of us have been left in the dark. Here is the situation nobody warns you about. In winter, road crews dump enormous amounts of salt on the roads. That salt kicks up into the underside of your car, into every seam and joint, and it eats the metal from the inside out. You never see it happen. By the time rust bubbles show up on the surface, the damage underneath has been spreading for years. Germans grew up watching this happen, and they built a simple habit to fight it. After the winter salt season, and often several times during it, they take the car and wash the underside. Not the paint, the underbelly. Many German gas stations and car washes have a special program just for this, with jets aimed up at the undercarriage to blast the salt out of the hidden seams. It costs a few dollars. I laughed at this the first time I saw a man pay an extra to spray water at the bottom of his car. Then Herr Vogel took me to a scrapyard and showed me 2 cars of the same age. One from the dry south, one from a salty northern coast. The northern one was lace. You could poke your finger through the wheel arches. That is what salt does when you never rinse it off. You do not need a fancy car wash for this. On a mild day, you can lay a lawn sprinkler on the ground, drive the front wheels up onto it, and let it spray the underside for a few minutes on each end. Or use a garden hose with a wand and aim up into the wheel wells and along the frame rails. The goal is simple. Get the salt off before it settles in for the winter. And here's why this matters more than any repair you will ever pay for. A rusted frame is the single most common reason a mechanically perfect car gets scrapped. The engine runs fine, the transmission is smooth, but the body is gone, and it fails inspection, and it is worthless. Germans keep cars on the road for 20 years, not because their cars are magic, but because they refuse to let the salt win. Now, who benefits when your car rusts out at year 8 instead of year 20? Not you. The dealership that sells you the next one does. The finance company that writes the next loan does. An entire industry is built on your car dying young, and a $5 undercarriage rinse is quietly the enemy of that whole machine. But rust is not the only slow killer hiding under your car, because the fluids inside it are timed to fail in a way that keeps you paying, and the Germans handle those differently too. Let me ask you something. When did you last change your brake fluid? Most people have never done it, not once, and most people have never been told they should. Here is what almost nobody in North America knows. Brake fluid absorbs water out of the air. It is designed to. Over 2 or 3 years, it can soak up enough moisture that its boiling point drops dangerously. And when you brake hard down a long hill, that water can boil, turn to vapor, and your brake pedal sinks to the floor with nothing behind it. Germans learned this in a country full of mountain roads and an autobahn with no speed limit where brakes actually matter. So in Germany, changing the brake fluid is treated as normal, routine, every 2 years, part of the rhythm of owning a car. It is a small job, it costs very little, and it can be the difference between stopping and not stopping when it counts most. The same mindset applies to something even simpler that I got completely wrong for years. the little tank of windshield washer fluid. I used to fill mine with whatever blue liquid was cheapest, or worse, just plain water. The first hard frost, the water in the lines froze solid, and I could not clear road grime off my glass at 70 miles an hour. Terrifying. Germans mix their washer fluid for the season with enough alcohol-based concentrate that it will not freeze even in a deep cold snap, and they add it in autumn before the first frost. Same idea as the ice spray. Alcohol lowers the freezing point. It is the difference between clear glass and a dangerous white smear when a salt truck passes you. None of this requires a mechanic. It requires knowing the calendar. Autumn means winter fluid and winter tires. Spring means wash the salt away. Germans run their cars on a rhythm, not on panic. And the panic is exactly what costs the rest of us so much. And that mindset is exactly what somebody, somewhere, would prefer you never adopt. If this way of thinking about cars, about keeping things running longer, spending less, and relying on knowledge instead of the dealership, resonates with you, then I want you to know that I have put together a much deeper body of this material in a series of digital books. German Basics, German Deep, and German Complete each go further into the practical, engineering-minded habits that this culture has carried for generations. You can find the details in the description below. They are built for exactly the kind of person who would rather understand the machine than be owned by it. Now, maybe you are sitting there thinking this all sounds fine for somebody with a garage, a set of tools, and a whole spare set of tires in the basement. Maybe you are thinking, my car is old, my driveway is small, I do not own a jack, this is not for me. I want you to hear me clearly, because the next part is built for exactly you, the person with the car you already have and not one extra dollar to spend. Start with the door locks and rubber seals, because this trick got me through an entire winter and cost nothing. On a freezing morning, a car door can seal itself shut when the rubber gasket freezes to the frame, and you can actually tear the seal trying to force it. Germans rub a thin film of ordinary glycerin, or even a plain candle, along the rubber seals in autumn. The wax and the glycerin keep water from sitting in the rubber and freezing it to the metal. You almost certainly have a candle in a drawer right now. That is the whole cost. Frozen keyhole, if your car still has one, a little hand sanitizer on the key, the alcohol melts the ice in the lock in seconds, you already own it. Foggy windows that will not clear. Here is one Herr Vogel's wife swore by. Take an old sock, fill it with cheap cat litter or plain rice, tie it off, and leave it on the dashboard. It quietly drinks the moisture out of the cabin air, and your windows stop fogging up in the morning. 2 things from around the house. No cost, and no more driving half blind while you wait for the defroster. And the cat litter does double duty, because if you ever get stuck on ice, a handful thrown under the driving wheels gives you grip to pull away. Germans have kept a bag of sand or grit in the trunk for generations, both for the weight over the wheels and for the traction when they are stuck. A bag of sand from the hardware store is a couple of dollars, and it has freed more stuck cars than any gadget ever sold. Here is one more that costs nothing and saves your wallet every single week. The way you drive. Germans practice what they call driving with foresight. They lift off the accelerator early and let the car coast toward a red light instead of racing up to it and slamming the brakes. On a modern fuel-injected engine, coasting in gear toward a stop uses almost no fuel at all, because the engine cuts the fuel when you are off the pedal and rolling. Slamming up to every light and stomping the brakes does the opposite. It burns fuel, and it wears out the very brakes we just talked about. They also shift up early, keeping the engine at low, calm revs, and they check tire pressure religiously, because a tire, even a little underinflated, drags on the road and quietly drinks your fuel. German testing bodies have shown that keeping your tires at the correct pressure and easing off the throttle can cut fuel use by a real, measurable share, enough that you feel it at the pump every month. That is money back in your pocket for changing nothing but your right foot. None of this needs a new car. None of it needs a specialist. It needs the car in your driveway and the willingness to do things the calm, deliberate way instead of the panicked, expensive way we were all taught. So where did all this careful, unglamorous knowledge come from? Because that is the real story, and it goes back much further than you would guess. Long before the rest of the world took cars seriously, Germans were building institutions to keep machines safe and long-lived. Back in 1866, in Mannheim, a group formed what would grow into the organization we now know as TÜV, created originally to inspect steam boilers so they would stop exploding and killing people. That same obsessive, methodical inspection culture rolled straight into the automobile. To this day, a German car must pass a rigorous technical inspection every couple of years, and if the frame is rusted or the brakes are weak, it does not drive, period. Then in 1903, German drivers founded the automobile club known as the ADAC, which became one of the largest motoring organizations on earth. For over a century, it has been running braking tests, tire tests, and fuel tests, and publishing the hard numbers. This is where a lot of that winter tire and idling research actually comes from. It is not folk wisdom, it is a century of measurement. So when Herr Vogel rubbed a candle on his door seals and rinsed the salt off his frame and swapped his tires by the calendar, he was not being quaint. He was carrying more than 100 years of a national habit, a country that decided a car is something you maintain and keep, not something you use up and throw away. And that mindset is exactly what somebody, somewhere, would prefer you never adopt. Because a nation of people keeping their cars 20 years is a nightmare for anyone whose profit depends on you buying a new one every 4. The knowledge was never really hidden from you on purpose by one villain in a room. It was simply allowed to fade, drowned out by advertising that makes maintenance feel like a chore and a new lease feel like freedom. But the single best thing they do, the one that pulls all of this together, is something I only learned near the end of my time there, and it is the one I promised you at the start. Here it is, the way to stop your windshield from icing over in the first place, so you never have to scrape at all. I found the roots of it in the old driver's habits, written up in German motoring guidance from the 1950s, back when heated garages were rare and most people parked on the street through brutal winters. The method is almost laughably simple. The night before a hard frost, you cover your windshield, but not with just anything and not the way most people try it. The trick has 2 parts, and the second part is the one everybody forgets. First, you lay a piece of cardboard, an old blanket, or a cut-open floor mat flat across the outside of the windshield. Then, and this is the key, you close the top edge inside the doors so the wind cannot lift it and peel it off in the night. The covering keeps the frost from ever touching the glass. In the morning, you lift it off and drive away on perfectly clear glass while your neighbors are still scraping. No ice ever formed because the moisture in the air settled on the cover instead of the cold glass. Now here is the older, cleverer German refinement, the part that feels like a secret. On nights when they had no cover, drivers would cut a raw onion or a raw potato in half and rub the cut face all over the outside of the windshield the evening before. The thin film of natural oils and sugars left behind changes how water sits on the glass, so instead of bonding into a hard sheet of ice, the frost forms as a loose, soft powder that wipes away with a single sweep of your hand. Sailors and coach drivers used the same trick on their lanterns and glass for generations before cars ever existed. I did not believe it. Of course I did not. So one frigid January night, I rubbed half an onion across the passenger side of my windshield and left the driver's side bare, as a test. The next morning, the bare side was locked under a solid crust of ice. The onion side had only a thin, feathery frost that I brushed off with my glove in one motion. I stood there in the cold, genuinely stunned, holding half a frozen onion, realizing that a 200-year-old kitchen trick had just beaten my $300 electric defroster. That is the whole thing. A cover wedged in the door, or half an onion the night before. No scraper, no idling, no burning 10 minutes of fuel and freezing your hands every winter morning for the rest of your life. It was written down, it was practiced by ordinary working people who could not afford to waste a single minute or a single drop of fuel, and it was quietly forgotten the moment we all decided it was easier to just buy our way out of every small problem. But it was never really lost. Old machinists like Herr Vogel kept it alive, passing it from garage to garage, father to son, and now it is sitting in your hands, ready to use on the very next frosty night. Think about what really happened here. We were handed a whole way of caring for a car that keeps it alive for 20 years, keeps money in our pockets, and keeps us safe on a cold road, and we let it slip away in exchange for the false comfort of just replacing everything. You did not lose that knowledge because you were careless. You lost it because someone found it more profitable for you to forget. If you are the kind of person who believes the old, careful, hands-on way of doing things was buried on purpose so somebody else could keep selling you the expensive way, then you and I are cut from the same cloth, and this is exactly the kind of thing we are going to keep digging back up together. So let me ask you straight. Are you going to try the onion on your windshield this week, or the candle wax on your door seals? And which one are you starting with? Tell me in the comments, because I read them, and I want to know if the onion trick stuns you the way it stunned me standing in that driveway near Stuttgart. And while you were there, tell me where in the world you are watching from and what winter looks like where you live. Because the salt on your roads and the cold in your air changes, which of these 15 tricks will save you the most? If any of this made you look at the car in your driveway a little differently, share it with someone who is still sitting there every morning with the engine roaring and the scraper in hand. They will thank you. And if you want to keep recovering this kind of buried, practical German knowledge, the methods that were quietly taken from us to protect somebody else's profit, then come along with me, because this is a whole movement of people refusing to be sold the expensive version of a simple life. Next time, I am going to show you the German way of storing a car battery over winter that can nearly double how long it lasts, using a shelf, a piece of wood, and one thing almost everyone gets dangerously wrong. You will not want to miss it. If you're still here with me, you're my kind of viewer. So let me tell you what's next. I'm holding back the deeper version of this inside the old way circle. In there you can ask me your own question, and a real person, me, answers you myself. You'd belong among practical folks just like you. Just point your phone's camera at the code on your screen, and you can cancel any time.